Story 1. Not a bartender, but I saw a man at the theater where I used to work. He was dressed up and had flowers for Valentine's Day. He sat in the lobby for over an hour and then quietly came up to the counter to ask if he could return his tickets. Story 2. I witnessed what seemed like a great first date. They started making out at the bar. He had long hair but a large forehead and a bald spot. His hat came off in the heated moment, and I saw the look on her face. Weeks later, I saw her again, and she used the phrase "hat fished." I'll never forget it. I still feel bad for the guy. He was very nice and paid for everything. Story 3. An older man was describing some peculiarities of his childhood and why his children and grandchildren weren't raised to believe in Santa Claus, as he wasn't either. An older woman would not drop the issue, and when he gently requested a change of subject, she raised her voice, calling him spineless, useless, and a disappointment. By that point, I had enough and told her that she needed to leave because she was being rude and scaring off customers. I informed the older man that his tab was on me and I would arrange a cab for him or for his date. He declined my offer, instead leaving me a few $20 bills, and they walked out together, with him sheepishly thanking me. Another sad scenario involved a man who showed up at the bar when it was a bit slow. I gave him his first beer and noted he was dressed nicely. Being chatty, I asked if there was a special occasion. He mentioned he was waiting for a girl for their first date and was quite excited. After hanging out at the bar for a while, he ordered onion rings and another beer. As it got busier, I didn't keep close watch on him, and an hour or two passed before I noticed he was still alone, looking confused and saddened. When I asked how he was doing, he said she hadn't arrived yet. Having been in that situation before, I got him a complimentary drink and asked if he needed anything else. An hour later, the date finally arrived, completely intoxicated. They walked up together to sit down, and she attempted to order shots. While most bartenders might overserve, I told her, "Perhaps you should slow down a bit. Here's a glass of water and a free soda." She knocked both over and demanded shots. The man appeared embarrassed. They placed a small food order, and about 30 minutes later, I saw him helping her into a cab with a takeout container. He returned, and we chatted whenever possible for the rest of the night. Dan, I truly hope you found the right woman for you. Story 4. I'm not a bartender, but I have a friend who is. She shared with me her experience of a bad date. They made plans to go out, and she ended up driving the guy to the event. Before they even arrived, he said he needed to use the restroom. They couldn't find anywhere public, so he ducked into an alley to relieve himself behind a dumpster. Then she heard him start swearing loudly. Concerned, she asked what was wrong, and he finally admitted that he had gambled and lost and soiled his pants. She drove him home with the windows open and no one speaking. End of date. Story 5. I was bartending at a casual fine dining seafood restaurant on a Monday night. An older man, probably in his mid-60s, came to the corner of the bar and asked me for a glass of our best red wine. I gave him the wine list and he selected the most expensive glass, which he could not pronounce. He mentioned he was waiting for someone as he quickly finished the glass. He paid for it and continued to wait. About 20 minutes later, he ordered another glass and settled the tab again. Roughly an hour after he arrived at the bar, a woman, probably 10 years younger than him, showed up. The man turned around and said in a disappointed tone, "Wow, you don't look anything like your picture." She sat down despite his comment and ordered a glass of house Chardonnay. I checked on them occasionally, but neither of them wanted to order food. Every time I listened to their conversation, I noticed that only he was talking mainly about his surgeries. When a bar table opened up behind them, the man looked at me and said, "We are sitting here and I am having dinner." He stood up and sat down before she could respond. When I brought menus over to them, he pointed at something random, and she ordered a small pasta dish. He continued to talk about himself and showed her pictures of his ex-wife throughout the meal. She barely spoke. Towards the end of the meal, he looked at her and said, "Have another glass of wine." She declined. He replied, "What do you think I'm going to do? Take advantage of you?" and turned to wink at me. She pushed her plate away and asked me for the check. Once the man said he was going to pay, She grabbed her purse and left. Story 6. This wasn't a bad date, but it's definitely a first date story I like to tell. I was tending an empty bar one night when a good-looking blind man in his 40s with a seeing-eye dog came in. He sat at the bar, asked some questions, and I got him some wine. He was really friendly, and we were having a good time chatting. He told me he was meeting his date there, and then they were going to leave to see a show. He then asked me, "Hey, can my dog sit at the bar?" "You mean in a stool at the bar?" "He'll do that." "Yeah." There was no one else there. "Okay, sure." He snapped his fingers, and the dog, a fully grown German Shepherd, hopped into the bar stool. Now both he and his dog were sitting across from me, all three of us at equal eye level. This was pretty entertaining, and I was having a blast joking with him. He then asked if his dog could have a beer. After a quick back and forth, I poured an India Pale Ale into a bowl in front of the dog, who finished it in about 10 seconds. He didn't even want to talk about the dog drinking beer. He just kept saying the funniest things and telling the most interesting stories. I had never wanted to keep talking to a person I had just met more. He had me completely captivated. I am a straight man, and this guy had me excited talking to him. 5 minutes later, the most attractive woman I've ever seen walked in and said, "Hi, Jerry." He paid his bill and left with her and the dog to go to a jazz show for their first date. The coolest person I have ever met. I think about him all the time. Story 7. I have been bartending for over 20 years and have seen many bad first dates, but the one that stands out to me was the guy who had his mother vet his date for him. He was at the other end of the bar, but she had to sit and meet his mother first. They were the only 3 people in the bar at the time, so it was incredibly awkward. I pretended to watch hockey, but I was so intrigued that I was eavesdropping the whole time. The poor girl seemed so lovely that she was too polite to bail out of the situation, so she actually stayed. I immediately knew something was off when she walked in and got stopped by the mother on her approach to him. The guy seemed so comfortable that it clearly was not the first time this happened. It was very strange. Story 8. I knew the girl from several years ago but only realized it after she had left. She and her date seemed to get along well at the start, but after about half an hour, neither of them was talking. For another half hour, they didn't say much, often looking at their phones until the guy suddenly got up and left. She then took out her laptop and worked on a Photoshop project for a while before heading off. Story 9. I was a bartender for over a decade. I watched a man leave the bar to use the bathroom. The woman he was with, on their first date, said to me, "How many times do I have to bring a date here for you to finally hit on me?" I told her I was engaged and had no interest. The man was on his way back from the bathroom and overheard her. He lost his temper and shouted at her in front of everyone, which was understandable. They both screamed at each other and left the bar. That was their first date, and I have not seen anything worse since. Story 10. I was working at a bar one weekday night. A woman came in, ordered a drink, and sat at the bar. On the opposite end, a man entered, ordered a drink, and took a seat. An hour passed, and their positions blocked their view of each other. After some time, I heard the man mutter, "Forget this," and put on his coat to leave. He headed for the exit near where the woman was sitting. They spotted each other and realized what had happened. Personally, if that happened to me, I would think it was very funny, but these two seemed annoyed with each other. They didn't talk much and parted ways after about 45 minutes. The biggest question is, why didn't either of them text their whereabouts to the other? They surely had communicated beforehand. Story 11. I was out one night before my shift started when a first date was taking place. The man's date went to the bathroom and he went to the bar, quickly drank a few shots, and then tried to grope a woman sitting at the bar. His date walked out of the bathroom just as I was escorting him out. Story 12. Not a bartender, but I ordered some hot wings with ghost pepper sauce from one. As he watched me eat the first wing, he told me about the last guy who had ordered them. It was a young man in a suit who was clearly on a first date with the girl he brought along. The man boldly ordered the ghost pepper wings to impress her, took a couple of bites, got up without saying a word, and walked off. After about 30 minutes, the girl realized he wasn't coming back and angrily got up to leave. but the bartender had to stop her and remind her that she still had to pay for the wings. Story 13. Not witnessed but heard a girl and a guy go on a blind date. They had been talking on the phone beforehand to get to know each other. And here comes the first date. They met at a bar. He arrived first and was waiting when she came in. They talked for a minute and he said, "Oh, let me get the flowers I got you. They're in the car." He walked out and didn't return. I felt bad for her. You can at least finish the date or have a drink and then leave gracefully. Story 14. I was a bartender at a restaurant. A 13-year-old boy came in for his first date with a 13-year-old girl. His mother brought them. She planned to get them seated at a table and then leave to eat at the bar herself. The boy would not let her leave. The girl hinted several times that the mother should go. The mother hinted about leaving too, but he ignored them. Finally, the mother said she was leaving to give them some privacy. When she tried to get up, the boy reached out, grasped her arm, and told her not to leave. They all sat there awkwardly at the table. One of the servers heard the girl in the bathroom on the phone making fun of how strange he was being about not letting his mother leave. Story 15. X showed up at the guy's date, sat down while they were eating, introduced herself, and started flirting with him in front of her. The guy had friends there, and they all could not believe it. You could hear a mutual expression of disbelief when she walked to their table. The X was quite attractive and was a Miss World runner-up. He left with the X. Story 16. She told me she was still in love with her ex, who was in prison for child molestation. To make it worse, she didn't seem to recognize his crime at all. She wasn't upset about the fact that he harmed children. Instead, she lamented that the universe was keeping them apart. She seemed just as troubled as he was. Story 17. It wasn't a date, but a man celebrating his 21st birthday kissed an older woman. She must have been in her mid-60s at least, old enough not to need to show her identification. The more he drank, the more they talked. Then suddenly, they started making out heavily. I was taken by surprise for a moment. It seriously caught me off guard. Story 18. It was not a first date, and I was the server. I asked the couple if they would like still or sparkling water. The man instead informed me that she had brought him there to sign divorce papers. I joked that he probably wanted a stiffer drink from the bar then. Story 19. I was a junior in college when I asked a lady from my senior-level astrophysics class out on a date on the first day of the semester. She was a first-year graduate student from Spain. I suggested we meet at the physics building at 6 p.m. and then go to dinner and catch a movie that very night. She said yes, which was great. I showed up at 6 p.m. in the same outfit I wore to school that day since the bus to my house would take a couple of hours round trip, and I didn't have a car. She arrived with her hair done, makeup applied, and wearing a really nice dress. She asked where we were going. I told her we were going to my favorite Italian restaurant just off campus. She then asked where I had parked my car, and I explained that I didn't have a car. She asked, "How old are you?" I answered, 20. She remarked, "You are just a child." Before that moment, all my physics friends thought I was impressive for getting a date on the first day of school. We had a nice night, but we never went out again. Story 20. I bartended at a bar while managing other commitments over 25 years ago. A nurse from the local hospital would stop in after her shift, and she eventually asked me out. On our first date, we went to another bar that had a band that night. She danced enthusiastically, and people moved out of her way to let her enjoy herself, which only reinforced her belief that she was an amazing dancer. Story 21. I don't think it was a first date, but it was the weirdest one I've seen. Once, there was this couple on a date, and the guy, whom we can call it, was super awkward, looking uncomfortable the whole time. His date, whom we can call F, seemed relaxed. While they were sitting at the bar, one of her male friends, whom we can call B, came in, sat down next to them, and started chatting with her. She wasn't being disrespectful to either her date or her friend while they all sat together. After some time, B finished his beer and walked outside to go home. The girl got up to use the bathroom, and they followed B outside to maybe confront him. B was built like a brick house, so that would have been a bad idea. After a while, I came back in, looking very distraught, and sat down next to his date. She asked him what had happened outside, and he deflected by saying that B was trying to screw her. She persisted in asking what happened, and he finally told her that he fought B in the parking lot. It was hard for me to believe because it didn't have a scratch on him. This made her furious at A, and she told him he was out of his mind for fighting one of her friends, especially since he was just feeling jealous. A couple of minutes later, B walked back into the bar, smiling as if nothing happened. He also showed no signs of being in a fight and sat down next to them at the bar again. She turned in her seat and said to her friend that he shouldn't have fought with A, who was burying his head in his hands. B was taken aback by the statement and peered around her, saying to A, "You told her you fought me in the parking lot? You wouldn't be standing if you fought me in the parking lot." From A's reaction, I knew that no fight had happened, and he had made up a strange lie for reasons unknown. His date had a repulsed look on her face, and I walked over and told them that someone needed to leave because there was too much tension in the air. I got up and walked out, reeking of shame. It was truly painful to watch, and I usually get a kick out of drunken, disorderly behavior. Story 22. My mom was a waitress and was once serving tables in the section next to a date that was going badly. She said she walked past just in time to see the man storm out and hear the woman yell after him, "And your mother's a bad person." Story 23. Not a bartender and not a first date, but the last. I was a waiter at Slamwich, and a couple was getting divorced. They decided that I was the perfect person to wait on them. They came in about once a week during my shift and asked for me to be their waiter. One time, they brought in a mediator who was somehow more confused than I was. Another time, they brought the mediator and kids. I was about 19 when this happened, so I was usually too hungover or busy with homework to care. However, they seemed to appreciate that and always left a good tip. I'll always remember the look on the mediator's face when they actually told me, "We brought a mediator today." And I said, "Oh, good." The usual. Story 24. A young couple, no more than 20. He ordered for her, which was a red flag. What he ordered for her was a salad, another red flag, along with a nice big meal to pair with it. He chose a standard meat and potatoes entree for himself. Before the food arrived, he went to the washroom, and she flagged me down, saying she was leaving and asked if she could pay her half. I told her no. He ordered everything so he could pay for it. She thanked me and left. It took him probably 30 minutes to ask if she had left, and I explained that she had and why. In the end, I got to eat the salad he ordered for her. Story 25. Not a bartender, but I'm a server. This man was going to propose to his girlfriend of 8 years. Things went south as soon as I introduced myself. I work at a fondue restaurant, so it's common for people not to know it's a different dining experience from other places. Part of my introduction is to ask the guests if they've ever dined here before. The woman said no, and the man said, "Yes, we have. We ate here a few months ago." The woman then responded, "That wasn't me." The couple chose our all-you-can-eat option, which normally takes around 2.5 hours. They ordered our most expensive cocktails and liquor from the menu. Throughout the dinner, she was asking all sorts of questions and requested his phone numerous times. The man was still trying to tell her that it was, in fact, her. Finally, he gave her his phone around the 2-hour mark. It turns out he was cheating on her with her best friend, who was also pregnant. Her best friend had told her that the baby's father was someone she was seeing, but the woman hadn't met him in person yet. The father, however, was actually the boyfriend. She splashed her drink, threw raw meat, and walked out of the restaurant. When I dropped off the check, the guy basically confessed to me that he had also cheated on her with her sister. Working at a fondue restaurant, there's honestly never a dull moment, but it was one of the most memorable experiences. Story 26. The one I can distinctly remember involved her using the phrase "my ex" 3 times in the first 5 minutes. Story 27. Witnessed a high school reconnection where the girl showed up before him, dressed beautifully and obviously still infatuated with the idea of the football star. He showed up in a tank top and a baseball cap, scruffy and balding, clearly not dressed for a date. It was not a 5-star restaurant but a decent beach bar. She seemed a bit disappointed, but the date stumbled along. I couldn't help but hover as things went from awkward reintroductions to attempts at conversation. She was trying desperately to convince herself this date was a good idea and that he was a great guy, but it was obvious he was not. He was oblivious, going on about how she would make a great mother because she's a teacher. She replied jokingly, "Oh no, I love the kids, but I get to give them back at the end of the day." And he doubled down. She changed the subject to fishing, and he said she couldn't really enjoy it. She shared a story about fishing with her dad, but he insisted it was a man's hobby and that she couldn't possibly find it fun. The conversation continued like this, and I could see she was getting more upset. At one point, he leaned over and said something into her ear. Her face contorted in disgust. She responded, "Is that how you think this date is going?" He went to the bathroom, still unaware, and she took her chance to wave me over. "2 shots of Fireball and the check, please." I rushed over with the shots. She knocked them back one after the other, and I started giggling. "Can I just say something?" I asked. She nodded. "This is in no way my business, but you seem really sweet and are way out of his league." She looked at me in shock and said, "Really?" "Yes, 100%. She decided to pay the entire tab and left before he returned. He looked at me and the empty seats and tried to hand me cash. I waved him off, saying she had already paid. His utter confusion was priceless. It's still my favorite awkward first date story. So uneventful, yet so memorable. Story 28. Her husband walked in and took her keys, telling her not to come home. Just before he stormed out the door, he turned abruptly and yelled, "And forget you, Mike! What the hell?" Story 29. They were discussing the angel shot and its implications. Both knew what it was. She ordered it in front of him. He simply got up and left. She ordered a pound of wings and cried while eating them. Story 30. A couple walked in and couldn't get a table, so they ate at the bar. They mentioned it was their first date during a casual conversation. At one point, after they had their meal, a third person joined them. It seemed like the 2 guys were just chatting over her, as she was sitting in the middle. I assumed they were friends, but it turned out they had all just met. The original guy went to the bathroom or something because when I checked back, she was ordering their tabs. He returned and they both left together. Later in the night, I noticed that the third guy was still going strong. As he was deciding whether to ask for his tab or another drink, he read a text before answering me and suddenly said he would take another beer. Fast forward to last call, and I caught the third guy with the first date woman making out at the end of the bar. He then asked me if they would tow his car if he left it there since he planned to ride with her. While some may feel bad for the original guy, I think he clearly dodged a bullet. I don't recall seeing either of those 2 first daters again. Story 31. I assume he was involved in finance. He used cocaine before she arrived, which I noticed because he was rubbing his nose immediately when he returned. He told the girl that he was on a business roll, and if she played her cards right, she would receive a designer handbag. He then proceeded to say that he wanted to use cocaine off her body. Needless to say, she left and I found it amusing. Story 32. I worked at a sports bar and one Tuesday, a man and woman came in at 4 p.m. They were touching each other under the table in plain view of everyone. Story 33. I was the bartender at a very busy club. Her best friend brought her in to meet me without informing me. She lied about her name and mentioned she had been married for 20 years. Story 34. I was a bartender, and this date happened to me, so I'm just sharing it here. I was on a first date and things were okay. A little awkward, but nothing beyond typical first date experiences. The woman had ordered a drink, but she was not intoxicated. I made the mistake of asking about her family, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "Well, I'm pretty sure my dad was an uncaught serial killer." She was quite the talker and proceeded to tell me how he owned a cabin in the woods that was his private retreat, separate from the main house. Nobody was allowed there, and no one ever saw the inside. She said he brought her random jewelry after his trips to the cabin, and she had to wear it whether she liked it or not. I was horrified. I think she was just trying to be interesting, but the way she told it was so nonchalant that it freaked me out. We never talked again after that date. Story 35. A man arrived an hour before his date and got drunk. He fell off his bar stool during the date at one point. She left with her friends. It was hard to watch. He seemed genuinely excited about the date when he arrived. Story 36. Whenever I was there, it was the most exciting part of their night. Otherwise, they were sitting in silence, just listening to the band. Story 37. Not a bartender, but I went to a pub with my then-girlfriend around 6 or 7 years ago. A guy came in and sat down at a small table for two. The waiter brought two menus and a pitcher of beer with two glasses, even though he was by himself. It was obvious he was waiting for a date. Over the next 60 to 70 minutes, he kept checking his phone more frequently. He ordered his food and ate probably half of it. Around 90 minutes after arriving, he realized he had been stood up and started ordering what looked like Jack and Cokes. He powered through about 7 or 8 of them while staring blankly at the wall. He paid his tab, got up, stumbled out, and walked down the street. I felt really bad for that guy. Story 38. As a bartender, I once made a joke about pigeons on a first date, which she did not enjoy. It turns out she was a vegan and an active animal rights activist, working at our local animal rescue. So I guess that one didn't go well. Story 39. I saw a man trying to explain to his date that since a dog's natural body temperature is a bit higher than a human's, it isn't harmful for dogs to be left in the car during 98-degree weather. Story 40. I'm not a bartender, but I did work tickets at the House of Blues. This night was a disaster. A younger couple walked in, and I scanned their ticket as they went down into the venue. About an hour later, there was a loud slam and a rush of people yelling at the bottom of the steps. It took 2 of our biggest security officers to carry a girl up the steps. She had fallen asleep drunk at the bar, fallen out of the stool, and hit her head on the concrete. They got her onto the couches, and as they carried her up, she was projectile vomiting everywhere. Sitting there on the couch, she was vomiting over the side. She tried to get up to presumably find her date, but she slipped in her vomit and landed belly first, practically diving into it. Like a cartoon character, she was slipping and sliding in her vomit while trying to get up, puking more as she did so. Security finally called an ambulance, and as they loaded her up, she was just dry heaving to the side. They carried her away, the show went on, and then ended. Finally, the date came up and started telling me what happened. This was their first time going out together. She got so drunk that she was yelled at for passing out at the bar and causing a scene. The guy said he would not be calling her back for a second date. I have so many stories from this place. Also, don't sit on the furniture at the House of Blues. They sprinkle cleaning powder on it until it is dry and flakes off. Then they flip the cushions and repeat. Nothing gets cleaned. If you smell cinnamon, it's probably cleaning powder. There's always cleaning powder. Story 41. A girl was out with her friends when she ran into her boyfriend, who was supposed to be with his friends but was actually on a date. This situation escalated in the parking lot. Story 42. I can't remember seeing any dates and thinking they were going rough. I've only bartended in seedy places, so not really first date spots. But I've seen a lot of Tuesday night strip club patrons come by with some girls on payroll. My favorite night was when I was cleaning the bar, thinking about closing early, when an older man with white hair, wearing a t-shirt tucked into blue jeans, came in with 2 stunning young women. By then, I already knew their situation based on the vibe, so I wasn't that surprised. It was one of the more stark differences. They ordered some food, a shot, and a drink each. Then he kept going to the bathroom, and the girls were very chatty. When he wasn't with them, they explained that they were dancers and that this man had offered them a couple of $100 to hang out with him for the night. One of them wasn't supposed to be drinking anything. When he came back, he would order drinks for them and specifically try to order doubles for the girl who was on guard, so I made her virgin versions of whatever he requested. Then they got on the jukebox and started playing some intense metal music from a vampire action movie from the 1990s or 2000s, and they kept telling me I needed to watch the movie while dancing like crazy in an empty bar. The man was definitely a little creepy, but the girls knew this and handled it like pros. When they told me not to serve the one girl, they weren't even slightly worried about his behavior. They were super matter-of-fact and seemed to expect to plan around it. By the end, I was just thinking that the old man had made an extremely wise investment because those girls were a lot of fun. I wish I could remember the name of that vampire movie they told me about. Story 43. I am not sure about the worst first date, but it was the worst for everyone who witnessed it. There was one time I had to ask a woman over the age of 55 to leave because she was openly allowing her date to touch her inappropriately at the bar. I walked over after it was pointed out to me by another patron. As I was working at the time, I tapped on the counter and said, "Now I know you aren't 16. Can we stop acting like it and get our hands where they belong?" The woman paid. I retrieved the card while wearing nitrile gloves, and I haven't seen her since. It's been about a year and a half. Story 44. I probably have a much better story for this, but this is the only one that springs to mind. I saw a couple come in, one basic blonde girl dressed to impress and fully done up. The guy was a typical Pacific Northwest man in a flannel shirt with a beard and a man bun. They had clearly just met on a dating app, and their sitting down was obviously their first in-person interaction. I could tell the woman was skeptical immediately. However, she was a good sport and gave him a chance. Within about 5 minutes of them sitting down, she asked him to let down his man bun. After some coaxing, he let down his hair to reveal one of the most brutal-looking bald spots I've ever seen. Think Friar Tuck but choppy and patchy all the way around, shiny on top and everything. She proceeded to laugh gently at him until he put his hair back up. I stopped paying attention to their interactions after that, as it told the whole story. I feel for the guy, but don't try to deceive people either. If you're bald, just embrace it and move on with your life. Hiding it like that seems silly and leads to embarrassing moments like this. Story 45. I was at a small shop that had a stone-fired pizza oven, with the pizza station located right behind the alcohol racks. A man walked in wearing an Italian shirt and chose to sit at the 2 seats 3 feet from the pizza maker, which was me. He was very much the stereotypical Italian American, looking and speaking like a side character from a television show. They both ordered pizzas, and he sat there discussing how traditional the pizza was and the art behind it. I had only been working there for 2 weeks and had never operated a stone oven before. Additionally, this was a small shop located in the middle of Boston and Cape Cod, so it wasn't traditional at all. The owner and chef weren't Italian. The girl was clearly shy and reserved, hardly speaking at all. I felt uncomfortable, even though I wasn't on a date. Eventually, they finished eating, and the guy suggested they go back to his place. She timidly replied that she would wait for a ride from her friend. After he had already paid, he seemed a bit upset but tried to play it off as her wanting to take things slow. As she waited alone, I slid her a free garlic bread because I felt bad. I couldn't do much, but it was something. Story 46. This is one of the most entertaining discussions I have come across in a long time. Of course, servers need to be observant, but customers often do not consider this. Story 47. I've seen a few interesting encounters. There was a woman my age, in her late 20s, and an older man, perhaps in his 50s, meeting each other for the first time. He spoke, but she seemed completely zoned out. The vibe between them was very off. She didn't even pretend to listen to him. After he paid and left, she stayed with me and flirted, only to later find out I'm gay. We hung out a couple of times, and I discovered she was in an open marriage and had her own sex-themed podcast. She was cool, but I couldn't shake the feeling that our meeting at my bar was somewhat of a catfish situation. Story 48. Not the worst first date, but an interesting one for me. One night, a private party booked our bar for the evening. Everyone was dressed to the nines, mingling, and enjoying their drinks. As the drinks flowed, my coworker and I noticed that some of the couples and solo attendees were getting quite close. They were very touchy, and a few even ended up with different partners than those they arrived with. We were perplexed by the behavior but minded our own business as they kept us busy serving drinks. They nearly drained our bar by the end of the night and all headed out around the same time. My coworker and I were cleaning up when my manager walked in, visibly red in the face. He admitted that he jokingly asked some of the last patrons if he could join their group, as they seemed like a good time. One of the guys lit up and drunkenly said, "My wife mentioned you were pretty cute. Come grab a drink and join us tonight." Put your keys in the pot, buddy. My manager politely declined but informed us that we had just served a swingers club. His exact words were, "You just got them drunk to go have fun with each other. Great, respectful group of people, and even though it's not my thing, I hope they had fun." Story 49. There's a bartender out there who probably tells people about the date I went on. Every day, I suggested the guy had plans. We finally decided on a Sunday night after I worked an 8-hour retail shift. I drove out of my way to meet him at the restaurant he chose. When I got there, I texted to ask where he was, and he said he was at the bar. I had hoped for a table, but whatever. When I walked up, he had 3 empty glasses in front of him. As soon as he started talking, I could tell he was completely intoxicated. He admitted to drinking 2 bottles of wine before leaving his house. Needless to say, I was not impressed. When I asked if he drove, he said he took a rideshare because I was going home with him and could drive. I hadn't taken a break all day, so I was starving and ordered an entree and a soda. He called me strange for not getting a drink. Then, when I wasn't exactly thrilled to talk with someone drunk, he kept saying, "You're so weird. Why are you so weird?" He kept trying to flirt with the bartender. She and I kept rolling our eyes. He finally got up to use the restroom, and I asked for the check, paid, and left. He proceeded to blow up my phone, calling me derogatory names. Super cool guy. Story 50. I was at a bar with a date when she felt the need to tell me about her brother overdosing. The date went south quickly after that. Long story short, I don't know how to console people, especially strangers. Thanks for making me cringe thinking about what the bartender overheard. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.